The sunscreen was almost gone. Phil frantically shook the vial, but he was only able to squeeze out a couple of drops. Damn, he swore softly. Glancing in the mirror, he saw red skin beginning to peel and sighed in frustration. You don't need sunscreen, Phil, he mimicked Dan, who had said those words just yesterday. The streets aren't so sunny anymore. Phil threw the bottle into the trash and walked slowly out of the bathroom, his hands tearing strips of white skin. Returning to the bedroom, he walked over to the bed where Dan slept and stared at him, filled with a mixture of love and rage. You're an asshole. Phil winced and sat down. What? Dan looked at him. When Dan saw the sunburn victim peeling skin of Phil, his jaw dropped. I'm in agony. You're a bastard, Phil continued. Dan just smiled and pulled back the covers. He was naked, like Phil, who unhappily climbed onto the bed, into Dan's arms. Look at me, he said, quieter this time. I'm a monster, a scary monster. He paused, feeling Dan's tongue on his peeling cheek. I think you're fucking sexy. Phil tried to pull away, but Dan didn't loosen his grip. Their bodies touched, soft skin rubbing against soft skin. Dan easily kissed him on the lips, but then turned his attention to a strip of skin detached from Phil's neck. Dan took it between his teeth and gently pulled. Phil closed his eyes. Maybe I lied about you not needing sunscreen. Dan groaned, sending Phil's scaly hands to his already excited penis. Maybe when it comes to oily skin, I have a strange fetish. It really hurts. Phil whined. Make it better. Phil gasped when Dan took off the strip of skin and sucked his mouth, tasting the salty flesh and running his tongue along the lumps before swallowing it. It's fucked up how strange. Phil was frowning, but to his shame, he was also excited. He continued to pleasure Dan until he tore pieces of his skin and licked the soft red flesh. Dan moved, Phil spread his legs, and Dan rubbed his torso so much that skin flakes filled the air. Phil screamed in pain. Dan, I have no after sun cream, and without it, it hurts too much. I can fix it, Dan said hoarsely. He moved and began furiously rubbing Phil's chest with his member. After just a few seconds, he finished. Oh my God! Phil grabbed the sheets while Dan rubbed his sperm into his reddened chest. Phil moaned, feeling the coolness, and began to fondle his penis. It was close. You burned my penis, Phil whispered, blushing as he remembered sunbathing naked the day before. He groaned as he felt Dan's tongue remove charred skin from his penis and soothe it with his burning tongue. When he finished, Dan sat down on the bed next to Phil. That was intense, muttered Phil. Dan reached out, took a long strip of skin from his thigh and began to twist it between his fingers, smiling all the while. You know, we're not getting out of bed until you're cured. Phil watched as his lover put a piece of skin in his mouth and chewed, and he whispered, I know. The end.